In the quiet countryside, nestled among rolling hills and lush fields, lies the small farmhouse belonging to my girlfriend's father. This serene and picturesque setting, with its quaint charm and peaceful atmosphere, seemed like the perfect place to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. The day was warm and sunny, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the distant hum of insects. It was a typical day spent in the countryside, where the simple pleasures of life, like a hearty meal and the company of loved ones, made everything seem perfect. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the landscape, we gathered around the dinner table. The meal was a feast, as always, and I indulged a little too much. With a full stomach and a sense of contentment, I decided to retire early, unaware that this decision would mark the beginning of a chilling ordeal. The farmhouse, with its creaking floors and thick wooden beams, had a rustic charm that I usually found comforting. But that night, as I lay in bed, the familiar surroundings began to feel unsettling. The silence of the countryside, usually so calming, seemed heavy and oppressive. The darkness outside the window pressed in on me, and I felt a strange unease, a sense that something was not quite right. I brushed off the feeling as a result of my overindulgence and fatigue. However, as I drifted off to sleep, I had no idea that I was about to experience a nightmarish episode that would blur the lines between reality and nightmare, setting off a chain of eerie and inexplicable events that would haunt me and my family in the days to come. As I settled into bed, the comforting weight of the blankets did little to soothe the growing sense of unease that clung to me. The room, usually a safe haven, felt unusually cold, and the shadows seemed to stretch and shift unnaturally. It wasn't long before I fell into a restless sleep, only to be jolted awake by a familiar and terrifying sensation: sleep paralysis. My eyes were open, and I could see the dimly lit room around me, but my body was frozen, unable to move or respond. The familiar dread set in, a silent scream trapped within me as I lay there, helpless. Then, from the corner of the room, she appeared. A figure, shrouded in shadow, slowly emerged into view. It was a woman, her features obscured by the darkness, but her presence was undeniably palpable. She exuded a chilling aura, her eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Her voice, soft yet commanding, echoed in the silence. "Let me enter your body." The words were clear, cutting through the fog of my semi-conscious state. My instinctive response was to refuse, a desperate mental cry of "no" resonating in my mind. Her reaction was immediate and terrifying. The calm facade shattered as she became visibly agitated, her face contorting in anger. She began to scream, a piercing wail that filled the room, reverberating through my paralyzed form. As she screamed, other figures started to materialize around her, vague and indistinct, but undeniably present. These shadowy entities murmured and lamented, their voices a haunting chorus of despair and anger. The air grew thick with tension, the atmosphere oppressive and suffocating. Desperately, I tried to move, to break free from the paralysis. My mind was racing, aware that this was a sleep paralysis episode. Yet the terror felt all too real. I focused all my willpower on moving, attempting to force myself to fall out of bed in hopes that the physical jolt would wake me. But instead of awakening, I found myself in a strange, dreamlike state. I was no longer in my bed, but wandering through the house. Everything seemed normal, yet off, an uncanny version of reality. The figures were still there, lingering in the corners of my vision, whispering and watching. I made my way through the house, the familiar surroundings distorted and eerie in this nightmarish landscape. As I approached my parents' bedroom, I saw them lying in bed, seemingly asleep and oblivious to the strange occurrences. The sight was both comforting and unsettling, a reminder of the normalcy that existed outside of this terrifying experience. Driven by an inexplicable impulse, I headed towards the window and, with a sudden, frantic urgency, leapt through it. The sensation of falling was sharp and vivid, jolting me awake. I awoke in my bed, my heart pounding and my body drenched in sweat. The room was silent, the only sound being the rapid beat of my heart. I glanced at the clock. It had only been 15 minutes since I'd laid down. The experience had felt much longer, an eternity of terror compressed into a brief moment. I lay there, trying to calm my racing thoughts, convincing myself that it was just another bizarre episode of sleep paralysis. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play, something that was far from over. The days following that night were filled with an uneasy tension, a sense of something unspoken lingering in the air. I tried to dismiss the experience as a mere figment of my imagination, a product of an overactive mind and an unfortunate bout of sleep paralysis. However, the eerie events that unfolded within my family soon made it clear that something far more unsettling was happening. It began innocuously enough. My brother, usually a sound sleeper, started to exhibit unusual behavior during the night. One evening, as I worked late into the night, I was startled by the sound of his voice echoing through the quiet house. He was shouting, repeating the word "no" with increasing intensity. The desperate tone in his voice was unnerving, filled with a mix of fear and defiance. Rushing to his room, I found him thrashing in his sleep, his face contorted with distress. When he finally woke up, he seemed disoriented and had no recollection of his outburst. The incident unsettled me, but I kept it to myself, unsure of what to make of it. A few days later, another disturbing incident occurred. My mother, who occasionally experienced bouts of sleepwalking, had an episode that sent chills down my spine. As I worked late again, I heard the familiar creaking of the floorboards, signaling her nocturnal wanderings. I got up to ensure she was safe, only to find her pacing the hallway, muttering to herself. As I approached, her words became clearer. "No, you cannot come in here." Her voice was firm, as if she were addressing someone unseen. When I gently guided her back to bed, she had no memory of her actions, attributing it to a dream she couldn't quite recall. The following day during lunch, I casually mentioned the incident to my mother, hoping to gain some insight into her strange behavior. To my surprise, she recalled a fragment of her dream, a vision of a drenched girl desperately trying to enter the house. The description struck a chord with me, but before I could fully process it, my brother chimed in, describing a similar dream he had had recently. He recounted how he had been confronted by a soaking wet girl who was trying to get into his room, and he had forcefully refused her entry. The parallels between their experiences and mine were too striking to dismiss as mere coincidence. As the days passed, the atmosphere in our home grew increasingly tense. Sleep became elusive, with each of us experiencing strange dreams and disturbances. The shared nature of these experiences, all involving a mysterious girl, was deeply unsettling. Despite our attempts to rationalize the situation, a palpable sense of dread hung over the house. It was as if we were all connected by an invisible thread, bound together by these bizarre and frightening occurrences. Confiding in my girlfriend, I learned a chilling detail that seemed to tie everything together. Before her father had purchased the farmhouse, a tragic accident had occurred on the property. A young girl had fallen into a well and drowned. This revelation sent shivers down my spine, as it seemed to explain the spectral presence haunting us. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to share the story with my family, omitting the part about the girl's tragic fate to avoid alarming them. My mother, being deeply religious, responded by filling the house with prayers, hoping to cleanse our home of any lingering spirits. For a time, her efforts seemed to bring a semblance of peace to our home. The disturbances lessened, and the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. However, just as we started to feel a sense of normalcy returning, our neighbor mentioned something that reignited our fears. Her brother had been experiencing sleepless nights, plagued by the sensation of being surrounded by shadowy figures, making noise around his bed. This shared experience, mirroring our own, suggested that whatever haunted our family might not be confined to our home alone. As the days wore on, the sense of unease that had settled over our household only deepened. Despite my mother's fervent prayers and our collective efforts to maintain a semblance of normalcy, the strange occurrences continued, their frequency and intensity increasing. It was as if our home had become a focal point for something otherworldly, an invisible presence that grew bolder with each passing day. The disturbances were no longer confined to our dreams. We began to notice odd noises in the house, sounds that couldn't be easily explained away. Doors creaked open on their own, footsteps echoed through the hallways at odd hours, and the temperature in certain rooms would inexplicably drop, leaving a chill that seemed to seep into our bones. Objects would go missing, only to reappear in unusual places, adding to the mounting sense of disorientation and fear. One particularly unsettling incident occurred late one night. I was working in my room, the house quiet save for the soft hum of my computer. Out of nowhere, the lights began to flicker, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. I felt a sudden chill, as if a cold breeze had swept through the room. Glancing around, I saw nothing out of the ordinary, but the sense of being watched was palpable. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and my pulse quickened as I strained to hear anything unusual. Just as I was about to dismiss it as a figment of my imagination, I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. It was faint, barely more than a murmur, but it was there, undeniably real. The sound seemed to come from all around me, filling the room with an eerie, disembodied voice. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was one of urgency, a pleading that sent a shiver down my spine. I stood frozen, heart pounding, as the whispering grew louder, more insistent, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. The following morning, I shared my experience with my family, hoping to find some reassurance. To my dismay, my brother and mother had also experienced strange occurrences that night. My brother spoke of hearing footsteps outside his door, accompanied by the faint sound of crying. My mother, too, had been woken by the sensation of someone standing at the foot of her bed, only to find the room empty when she turned on the light. These shared experiences only served to heighten our collective anxiety, as we realized that whatever was happening was affecting all of us. In the midst of these unsettling events, we tried to maintain a semblance of normal life. We went about our daily routines, albeit with a heightened sense of vigilance, constantly on edge. But the atmosphere in the house was thick with tension, a palpable fear that hung in the air like a storm cloud. We found ourselves speaking in hushed tones, as if afraid that raising our voices might provoke whatever was haunting us. Our neighbors, casual mention of her brother's sleepless nights added another layer of unease. His descriptions of shadowy figures and strange noises mirrored our own experiences, suggesting that the phenomena were not confined to our house alone. This revelation opened up a host of new fears and questions. Was our home somehow connected to a larger, more widespread haunting? Or was there something specific about our situation that attracted these occurrences? The uncertainty was maddening, leaving us with a sense of helplessness that was as oppressive as the events themselves. As the disturbances continued, we became increasingly desperate for answers. The stories of the drowned girl, the shared nightmares, the unexplained noises and movements, all seemed to point to something sinister and unresolved. We felt trapped, caught in the grip of forces beyond our understanding or control. The once comforting walls of our home now felt more like a prison, a place where reality and nightmare blurred, and the line between the living and the dead seemed to grow ever thinner. The relentless disturbances in our home led me to dig deeper into the history of the property, hoping to uncover some explanation for the supernatural events plaguing us. What I discovered only added to the growing sense of dread. The story of the drowned girl was not merely a tragic accident, but part of a series of unsettling events tied to the land. As I researched, I found old newspaper articles and local legends that painted a grim picture. The farmhouse had a long history, with stories of strange happenings dating back decades. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the land being cursed, a place where misfortune seemed to linger. The most chilling account involved the young girl, who had tragically fallen into a well and drowned many years ago. Her death was surrounded by rumors of foul play, with whispers of a family dispute and accusations of negligence. The well, now filled and forgotten, had been a focal point of the farm, a vital water source turned grave. Further investigation revealed that the girl's death was not the end of the eerie occurrences. Subsequent owners reported seeing her apparition, a spectral figure wandering the grounds, often described as wet and forlorn, as if perpetually reliving her final moments. There were stories of children being drawn to the area, inexplicably fascinated by the spot where the well once stood. Some even claimed to hear a faint crying at night echoing through the fields. Armed with this knowledge, I couldn't shake the feeling that the disturbances in our home were connected to the restless spirit of the drowned girl. Her presence seemed to be a cry for help, a desperate attempt to communicate something unresolved. The shared nightmares of my family and our neighbors' experiences suggested that the spirit was reaching out, not just to us, but to anyone who entered the vicinity. I decided to share my findings with my family, carefully choosing my words to avoid causing undue alarm. My mother, deeply religious and sensitive to such matters, took the revelation seriously. She believed that the girl's spirit was trapped, unable to move on due to the circumstance of her death. My brother, usually skeptical of such stories, couldn't deny the eerie similarities between our experiences and the accounts I had uncovered. We debated what to do next, torn between fear and compassion. My mother suggested a blessing or a cleansing of the house, hoping to provide peace to the restless spirit. She reached out to our local priest, who agreed to visit and perform a ritual. In the meantime, we tried to maintain our composure, though every creak of the house, every shadow flickering in the corner of our eyes, heightened our anxiety. The priest's visit was both solemn and hopeful. He performed the blessing, walking through each room, sprinkling holy water and offering prayers for the girl's soul. He spoke of forgiveness and peace, urging the spirit to move on to the next life. We followed his lead, each of us silently praying for an end to the disturbances. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house seemed to lighten, as if a weight had been lifted. The strange noises and sightings decreased, though the memory of them lingered, casting a long shadow over our peace of mind. We dared to hope that the worst was over, that the spirit had found some semblance of peace. However, as we would soon learn, the connection between our home and the girl's tragic fate was deeper and more complex than we had realized. The lingering presence, though diminished, was still felt, a silent reminder of the past hold on the present. The revelation of the dark history had brought us closer to understanding the events that had unfolded, but it also opened up new questions and fears. Had we truly laid the spirit to rest, or was this merely a lull before another storm? The uncertainty kept us on edge, waiting for what might come next. The initial calm following the priest's blessing gave us a false sense of security. While the disturbances had lessened, they had not ceased entirely. Subtle reminders of the eerie presence continued to plague our home. Faint whispers in the night, a persistent chill in certain rooms, and an inexplicable sense of being watched. These lingering sensations hinted that the spirit of the drowned girl had not fully moved on, leaving us in a state of perpetual unease. Determined to bring a definitive end to the haunting, we sought the help of a local medium known for her ability to communicate with spirits. Though skeptical of such practices, we were desperate for answers and willing to explore any means to rid our home of the unsettling presence. The medium, a calm and composed woman with a reputation for sincerity, agreed to visit and conduct a session to reach out to the spirit. The night of the session was tense, the air thick with anticipation and fear. We gathered in the living room, the medium sitting at the center with a few items, candles, crystals, and a small bowl of water, symbolic of the girl's watery fate. She began by meditating, creating an atmosphere of quiet focus. Then she invited the spirit to communicate, promising that we were there to listen and help. As the session progressed, the medium's demeanor changed, her face becoming more somber. She described sensing a young girl's presence, a spirit burdened with confusion and sorrow. The girl's spirit, she explained, was tethered to the land by the circumstances of her untimely death and the unresolved emotions surrounding it. The spirit was not malevolent but lost, seeking acknowledgement and closure. The medium relayed messages she claimed to receive from the spirit, feelings of betrayal and abandonment, a longing to be remembered and understood. These emotions resonated with the girl's tragic history, suggesting that she felt forgotten and wronged, both in life and in death. The medium advised us to perform a ritual of remembrance and apology, to acknowledge the girl's suffering and to express our wish for her to find peace. Taking the medium's advice to heart, we prepared for a small ceremony at the site of the old well, now a grassy patch in the garden. We gathered there the following evening, under a sky dimming to twilight, carrying flowers, a candle, and a small plaque inscribed with the girl's name. Research had revealed her name to be Eliza, a detail that humanized the haunting and deepened our empathy. As we stood around the site, my mother led a prayer, asking for Eliza's forgiveness and peace. We lit the candle, a symbol of light and hope, and placed the plaque in the ground as a mark of remembrance. Each of us spoke a few words, expressing sorrow for her tragic fate and our wish for her to find rest. The medium, present to guide us, chanted softly, her voice blending with the gentle breeze. In that moment, a profound stillness settled over the garden, a silence that felt both heavy and comforting. It was as if the very air had shifted, a subtle but perceptible change that suggested our words had been received. The medium, after a long silence, assured us that the spirit felt acknowledged and that the act of remembrance had helped ease her lingering unrest. For the first time in weeks, we felt a genuine sense of closure. The ritual, simple yet heartfelt, seemed to have reached across the divide between the living and the dead, offering Eliza the recognition she needed to move on. As we extinguished the candle and made our way back to the house, the atmosphere felt lighter, the oppressive presence noticeably diminished. In the days that followed, the house was quiet, free from the disturbances that had plagued us for so long. The sense of being watched had faded, replaced by a calmness that hinted at resolution. While the memory of the events lingered, casting a long shadow over our perception of the house, we felt hopeful that we had finally laid the spirit to rest. The confrontation had been a test of our resilience and compassion, a reminder of the delicate balance between our world and the unseen. In Savis Itavosav, Guard the confrontation with Eliza's spirit, our household slowly began to return to a sense of normalcy. The oppressive atmosphere that had once permeated every corner of the house lifted, replaced by a palpable calm. The inexplicable noises ceased, and the unsettling sense of being watched dissipated, leaving us with a much-needed peace. The ritual at the old well site had served as both an act of closure for the restless spirit and a cathartic moment for us, helping to heal the collective unease that had gripped our family. However, the process of seeking peace was not merely about the absence of disturbances. It also involved a deeper reflection on the events we had experienced. As a family, we took time to discuss what had happened, sharing our thoughts and feelings in a way that brought us closer together. The ordeal had been frightening and bewildering, but it had also highlighted the importance of empathy, understanding, and the acknowledgement of unresolved issues, whether in life or the afterlife. We also considered the broader implications of our experience. The revelation of the girl's tragic past and the acknowledgement of her lingering spirit had opened our eyes to the complex ways in which past events can imprint themselves on a place, affecting the present. This awareness made us more sensitive to the history and energy of our home, prompting us to engage in more thoughtful practices to maintain a harmonious living space. My mother, especially, continued her prayers and rituals, not out of fear, but as a means of fostering positivity and protection for our family. In seeking peace, we also reached out to the local community, sharing our story with a few trusted neighbors. The tale of the drowned girl and the strange occurrences had become a part of the local lore, a cautionary tale about the importance of respecting the unseen and the past. Our discussions with others revealed that we were not alone in our experiences. Other families had encountered inexplicable events, although not all were willing to speak openly about them. This sense of shared experience fostered a sense of solidarity, a recognition that our ordeal was part of a larger tapestry of mysteries that shaped our community's collective identity. To further honor Eliza's memory and to ensure that her story was not forgotten, we decided to create a small memorial garden at the site of the old well. This garden became a place of reflection and remembrance, a quiet space where we and others could pay their respects. The memorial served as a tangible reminder of the past and a symbol of our commitment to acknowledging and honoring those who had come before us. The act of creating this space was therapeutic, helping us to process the events we had lived through and to transform a place of tragedy into one of beauty and peace. As we continued to heal, we found that the experience had left a lasting impact on our perceptions and beliefs. We became more attuned to the subtleties of our surroundings, more aware of the unseen forces that might influence our lives. This heightened awareness did not lead to fear, but rather to a greater appreciation for the mysteries of existence and the interconnectedness of all things. We learned to approach the unknown with respect and curiosity, recognizing that some questions might never be fully answered, but that they still held value in the search for understanding. Ultimately, the journey toward peace was ongoing, a process of continual reflection and adaptation. The experiences we had shared, both within our family and with the spirit of Eliza, had woven themselves into the fabric of our lives, leaving us changed. While we hoped that the disturbances were truly behind us, we knew that the memory of them would linger, a reminder of the thin veil between the known and the unknown, the living and the dead. In seeking peace, we had found a deeper connection to each other, to our home, and to the stories that shape our world. In the weeks and months that followed the resolution of our paranormal ordeal, our home remained a quiet sanctuary, free from the disturbances that had once plagued us. The sense of relief was palpable, yet we couldn't completely shake off the memory of what had transpired. The experience had left a profound impact on us, altering our perceptions and deepening our understanding of the unseen forces that sometimes intersect with our lives. As life gradually returned to normal, we continued to maintain the memorial garden for Eliza, tending to it with care. The garden became more than just a tribute. It was a place where we could reflect on the events and find a sense of peace. Visitors, curious or sympathetic, occasionally stopped by, drawn by the story that had quietly spread through the community. We welcomed them, sharing our experience and emphasizing the importance of respect and remembrance. Despite the outward calm, there were subtle reminders that hinted at a lingering presence. These were not the terrifying manifestations we had previously experienced, but rather gentle, almost comforting signs. Occasionally, we would hear the soft sound of footsteps or feel a faint breeze pass through a closed room. Lights would flicker briefly, as if acknowledging our presence. While these occurrences were disconcerting at first, we came to interpret them as benign, perhaps a lingering echo of Eliza's spirit, now at peace, but still connected to the place she had known. Our neighbors, too, reported similar minor incidents, fleeting shadows or a sense of being watched. Unlike before, these events did not inspire fear, but rather curiosity and a sense of wonder. It was as if the veil between our world and the spiritual realm had thinned, allowing for brief moments of contact. This perspective shift allowed us to coexist with these occurrences, viewing them as part of the natural fabric of our environment rather than as threats. Our family's bond strengthened through the shared ordeal. We had faced an unknown, confronted our fears, and emerged more united, an understanding of each other's vulnerabilities and strengths. The experience fostered open communication and a deeper appreciation for our relationships, both with each other and with the unseen aspects of our world. Looking back, we realized that the events had also enriched our community, sparking conversations about history, memory, and the nature of the paranormal. Some neighbors shared their own experiences with the unexplained, finding solace in the knowledge that they were not alone. Om wat is as deze koningin. Sage, hele say, ting